Good evening, everybody. As y'all may notice, we're one of the three musketeers short tonight. Rip found out just a little bit ago when he texted me that he should have internet by 9 p.m. tonight. He hasn't had internet all day today. Something happened, something broke. He said there's been heavy equipment there and they've been replacing stuff and all kinds of stuff. So he's not going to be able to join us tonight, but we are going to do our best to make everything work and have tonight's episode. How you doing, Jeff?
Man, if it don't get any better, right?
You look well rested.
That's pretty much all I've done since I got here. I eat, I sleep, and I repeat. Okay.
Well, let me ask you this: how much lumpia have you had in the last 3 or 4 days?
Now Rosa brought me a pan of lumpia, so I ate like 15, and then I've only had 3 more since then. So, because the stuff here at the resort
Yeah.
is not as good as Rosa's, so I don't eat it. Okay, I'm spoiled.
I mean,
Once you've
I
had the
understand.
best, yeah,
It's like that's like with me in Chinese food in Birmingham. There's a place that me and my family's been going for probably 8 or 10 years, maybe longer. And my wife's boss said that this other place was the best around. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute now. That's a heavy claim. But my wife and I went over there and it's becoming our new spot. And it's a longer drive, but it's well worth it. I told my son about it. He said, Daddy, you're full of crap. I said, you gotta go try it. And he did. And he was like, man, this sucks. I said, why? He said, now I gotta drive 45 minutes to get good Chinese. So yeah, there it is.
there it is.
So
I'm surprised you've
tonight,
been going to the same one for like 8 years. That's unusual. Usually, okay, they come in, they do really good for like 3 or 4, and
mhm.
then cleanliness and all that kind of starts sliding away. Um, yeah,
Now, one thing this place has done is during COVID, they got into the rut of when they were allowed to open back up. They had plexiglass and they would hand you to go through a hole. And now they still want to serve you on styrofoam plates and plastic forks. Um, I don't like that. If I go in a restaurant and sit down, I want a real fork. Now, I'll eat off paper plate, but I don't want to eat out of a plastic fork.
I hear you.
I mean, I don't do it.
All right, what do you got for us tonight?
All right, so tonight I have good news and bad news. Some of the where I've been highlighting the questions that I've been asking out of our list hasn't been saving for some odd reason. So I'm going to do my best to give questions that were not asked before, but I mean, last episode was 2 weeks ago, and time before that was 2 weeks. So I barely remember that I had shrimp for dinner last night. So we're gonna do our best.
Well, how's your leaderboard going? Do you have that?
I do have that.
Okay.
And right now, Laura Elwood is smoking past everybody else. She has 6 points. The next person has 3.5, and that's Laurie Ashley. And then John Pelton has 3 points. Sue Dobson has 2.5. And there's a couple that have 2 and a couple that have 1. And our friend Kelly, he's got half a point. So that is saving. But for some reason on the other sheet, when I highlight the stuff, it doesn't save. So I saved it as another file name, and I'm gonna try highlighting again tonight and see how far we can get.
All right. You saving that in OneDrive or something?
Yeah. And then I just think, man, it's Microsoft. It sucks. I should save it onto my iCloud because I know that iCloud's been faithful to me for a long time.
I just
Here,
save a hard copy right down on my computer.
but see, the problem for me is I use my laptop sometimes, like what I'm doing now, and others I use my desktop computer when I'm at the warehouse. So
All right.
with the iCloud, both of them are Macs, so they synchronize everything. If I got a file on my laptop, that same file is on my desktop. So here's a question for you. Google, let's see, somebody, Homestead Matters says Google Drive is another answer. And I use it as well, but I'm kind of spoiled to my iCloud because it synchronizes between my computers, and that helps a lot. Jeff, I know you're going to love this question. I really don't think it's been asked before. But whether you're in Vermont, Alaska, Florida, or Texas, do chickens need a heat lamp in the wintertime? Now, let me be specific. I'm not talking about young chicks. I'm talking about mature chickens.
You're asking me, or are you going? Or is this for everybody?
This is for everybody. And
Well,
Laura, man,
she's smoking it.
dude, gosh, she is on. She ain't even said hello today.
She did.
Oh
You
wait,
missed
yeah,
it.
she did.
She
She
did.
did. She did. I'm gonna give
Yeah.
her credit. She did say good evening, but she popped out with that question fast,
I think
and
she
that
already
is
had it
the
on.
answer.
I bet she already had it on screen. She was just like,
I mean, do you think she's like tunneled through to my computer?
Now I'm going to pick on you, right? Because Laura's from the north,
Yep.
right? And by the time you got done using your southern draw to ask the question, she already knew where you were going with it and had the answer typed, right? So you either
Yeah,
have to talk,
I might
you
have
either need
given
shorter
her.
questions or you need to talk faster.
Well, and it could have been, a hint when I said that you would love it because we've talked a lot about not using supplemental heat in the wintertime. I mean, I have a friend of mine that raises quail and she keeps her quail outside, and I've seen pictures of that thing with snow stacked up against it as tall as it is. And when I asked her about it, she goes, the snow just blocks the wind more. Let's see. Oh, this is one that I know we haven't asked. How do you safely integrate new chickens into an existing flock? What is the process for that when you bring them home? What do you do?
Wait, two different questions there. Oh, boss, you blended too much together. Is it?
Bringing them home, however,
No, no, no.
wherever the chickens come from, how do
Okay,
you safely integrate new chickens into your existing flock?
I'm just telling you, you've got two different subject lines there.
I agree. It is a two-part answer. And I see people dancing around it.
Well, Laura's got half of it. Of course she did.
Let's see, Homestead over here. She's gonna take that one.
Well, she got the other half. See, that's what I mean. Your question was not clear.
Well, but she says quarantine for 40 days and then slow, separate, invisible interactions to get them integrated.
Okay, but Laura's answer was also correct.
So we're gonna do half point for each on that one. So
my point being is there's two different steps here. One, if you bring new chickens home, that's a 30-day quarantine.
Right.
Okay. Flat out 30-day minimum. And you need to stress them, right? Give them a bath, right? Just stress that because you won't know if there's any hidden viruses in those birds unless you apply cruel and unusual stress. Okay. If you baby them, you're never going to see it. Okay. So,
That's true.
all right.
And
So
what
bringing
I'll
new,
do when I bring them home, I have some of those large dog kennels, and I will put them in the furthest part of my front yard, downwind from everything else, and they'll stay there for a little over a month. I'll give them shade, but I may squirt them with a hose pipe. I may feed them for a couple of days and not feed them for a day. Like you said, I try to stress them out because a lot of diseases will lie dormant until they get stressed. And if they don't get stressed out until you integrate them in with your flock, then that's a little too late.
right? We all got to learn something new tonight. Okay. The word quarantine comes from the Italian word quaranti. I can't say it. Anyway, meaning 40 days. So,
Well, that's okay. So maybe that's why it's a little over a month, is what a lot of people
right.
say, month at minimum, because it comes from an Italian word that means 40 days.
Yeah. So
I like that.
there was three segments actually to your answer, right? And one is if it's a brand new bird to your farm or your location, quarantine 40 days. I'm going to change my story now. 40 days. And you can do, like some socialization where they can see each other beside, after the quarantine, you can put them where they can visually see each other, kind of acclimate, socialize, whatever.
Yeah.
But then when you actually put them together, Laura is right. You put them on the roost in the dark at night, okay, and let them all wake up together. So there's three parts to the whole, for sure two, but there's three parts depending on how, and you started it with how do you integrate, right? Or how do you put new birds into your flock? Well, okay, I didn't know you just brought them home and they're mature. So anyway, it's good. We covered it.
But and see, that's the whole part of playing this game and this series is learning new stuff for us, because I had no clue where the word quarantine came from,
No,
and I like 40 days.
yeah.
So we get to learn, and our viewers get to learn from each other. So that's really good too. Let's see. What is another? Oh, I saw this on a couple of different chicken groups this week. How do you detect and manage bumblefoot? Let's see. Rob says when he's adding a new mature rooster after quarantine, he just throws them in there. I do it at nighttime, but that's,
He just throws them to the wolves, man. Let the pack hunters win.
I mean, depending on what you're looking for. Let's see. I saw. think this is.
Yeah, but you were looking for the symptoms. So I almost, Rob hit the limping,
Yeah.
which is what you'll usually see. Um,
I mean, here's another. I can read. I can agree with preventing it like that.
well, you said detect. You didn't say treat, right? You said detect.
Detect and manage.
Right.
So, which one of these do you like the best?
Well, I'm only going from my experience, so I don't want to get yelled at, but I detect it by limping, so I'm looking for where they're favoring a foot or limping, right? And of course, you keep the bedding or the litter clean and dry. Dry is really important, actually, to bumblefoot, because higher moisture environments soften the sole of the foot and allow for
Mm-hmm.
injury to occur a little more quickly.
Yep.
That pad should be pretty leathery in a good living environment. That foot pad should be somewhat leathery and thicker. Uh, so I was looking for limping and clean dry environment. I'd give it to Rob. That's just my opinion.
Yep. All right. Let's see here. That is going to get Rob in here with a point. That's his first point. So I had to type the name and all that good stuff. And so, funny thing about Bumblefoot is I was having a conversation one day with John Gunnerman about pens getting mucky from the never ending rain, like what we've been having. And he told me that what he did, like when the snow and stuff, when they had their melt off, is he would put pallets in, like wooden pallets, and the birds could get up on top of those and, get out of the muck. So I was like, hey, that's not a bad idea. Sounds good. And, I ship and receive a whole lot. So I have pallets, and I got some pallets and got some that look good. Didn't see anything crazy going on about them. Hit them with one of those big brush torches, like you burn grass in your concrete with and that kind of stuff. Hit them with that so any little bitty fine pieces of wood would burn off, and put them in there. No problem. Till I started having some of my American breasts got bumblefoot, and they were getting splinters in them because their nails were scratching the wood, and they were getting it, which makes absolutely no sense to me because that's what my rooster made out of. But I don't know if it's a lesser quality of wood that they use for the pallets that makes it fray like that. No clue. So I just started making um, essentially sawhorses that were about 2 feet tall, and that works out pretty well. What is the optimal temperature for brooding chicks straight out of the hatcher?
I think we had this one before, but maybe
Yeah,
not.
I think we have to, actually, now that I read it.
Yeah.
So let's don't do that. John got that one right. Here's another question for y'all. How do you control ammonia levels in your chicken houses?
Two-part answer.
I mean, could have, yeah, at least. Let's see. John was fast on that one. Keep it clean and ventilation.
There you go. Winner, winner.
Yep. And if the human can smell, this one's for you, Jeff. If I can smell ammonia from my chicken poop, how many parts per million is that?
The scientific data shows that the average human cannot detect ammonia until it reaches approximately 25 parts per million in the air. And poultry, respiratory, bronchial, respiratory, lungs, etc. system start to become affected, and damage will occur at 10 parts per million.
So if you can smell their crap and you smell that ammonia, it's already twice the level at minimum.
2.5 times greater than when
What's
damage
messing
starts
them
to
up.
occur. Yeah. A lot of times I'll recommend to, farmer or poultry keepers, often young children can detect it more easily than us old farts, right? Because we get attuned to it, or we get nose blind, as the one commercial talks about, and so we miss it. But it's yeah. So oftentimes, if you take like a 3, 4, 5-year-old, 6-year-old who doesn't spend a lot of time in there, they can detect it at a maybe lower level than you will, but yeah, but the scientific studies show that a human nose is 25 parts per million. But
for a nominal fee, you can actually get a detector that you can connect to your Wi-Fi, and it will detect that for you. Just say it. I do not have one because it was not worth $150 to me. So I just get, my wife knows what ammonia smells like. She's used it to clean. And I get her to come in the barn every now and then and be like, hey, smell okay in here? Yep, I'm going back in the house. So this is a good time of year to ask this question. Okay, Ingrid, is that a scientific fact, or are you just stating the obvious? Ingrid says ladies smell it sooner than men because they have more taste and nose buds. I mean, I could see that.
that could be. I don't know.
Ooh, she says it is a sign. Okay.
Okay.
Then I'm going to stick to getting my wife in there.
You need a kitchen pass for that, I believe. I ain't sure that's going to happen.
I mean, she'll come out there. What I have to do is I have to catch her because the barn where I do my hatching and my brooding is right at the end of the driveway. So I have to catch her either coming or going. If I can do that, then I'm good.
You can't lure her out to the chick house with wine and chocolate?
No.
Okay.
Nope. Let's see.
What you got?
All right, here we go. What is the best way to sanitize a waterer?
Tough question.
Well, I think there's 3 different ways.
Well, there's 1. There's 2 and 3. So how are you going to split that?
Well, so all right. I don't think boiling water would do it because most waterers are plastic, and the amount of time that you would have to keep them in the boiling water, I would think that would melt it.
Most of your pathogen bacteria die at 167. So you really don't have to have that much exposure.
So, like, if you just dip it in there, you can go for it.
Yeah, I mean, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. You could go out there with boiling water. Doesn't even have to be boiling. Like I said, 167. So if you got coffee hot, or if you got water hot enough to make coffee at 180, then you're good to go. But
Okay.
that is a viable option. So is sun, but I hate to see that one come out because someone talked about sun. Well, yeah, but I don't want chickens to have to go out into direct sunlight in the middle of this, July, August to get a drink of water. But
They're not going to want to either.
they won't.
All right, so we're going to give
Peroxide works, bleach works, Tectrol works.
Yeah. So what I was looking for was vinegar, bleach, and Tectrol. I didn't even think about boiling water, all that, because
Yeah, white
again,
vinegar works.
most of them are plastic, and I'd be afraid it would mess it up. Now, Homestead Matters says if the water was glass, but I do use glass in my brooders. Let's see. What are your thoughts, Jeff, on high vinegar water?
What do you mean high vinegar water?
Homestead Matters just asked a question. I'm wondering if it's if they mean like apple cider vinegar and water.
Well, I would not recommend a high solution. It's always 1 to 2 ounces per gallon. So you're either 64 to 1 or you're 128 to 1, depending on what I don't know the metric reference are off the top of my head, but so it's not an extremely high concentration,
yeah,
at roughly 1%, 1 to 2%.
So when people ask me that question, I tell them a shot glass per gallon.
Yeah. So she's talking about 30% vinegar
For sanitizing.
Right. So, there really isn't, okay, when you're sanitizing, there's none left in the water, right? By the time the chickens drink. But if you're using that as a water additive, then we have to work it down based on its percentage, because common vinegar purchased at the local grocery store is only 5 or 6%.
So what she's saying is for cleansing, not for keeping it in the water for them to consume. So I'm thinking they're asking about using the 30% vinegar as the vinegar that we were talking about to clean. And, if there's some residual on there, if you don't rinse it off good enough or whatever, I don't think it's going to harm the birds.
No.
It's
not going to be enough to matter.
And bleach will off gas in the sun very quickly. Fun fact about bleach, you can actually take a glass of bleach and set it in direct sunlight, and 48 hours later, it's safe to drink. It'll still taste a little funny, but it's safe to drink.
I'll pass.
Me too. That one's been asked. That one's been asked. That one has been asked. Oh, this one's been asked too. But this question right here, I think I've asked it before. What are the advantages of fermenting poultry feed, if any?
Come on, you're baiting people.
So I saw somebody today in a quail group that said that they read in a group that fermenting feed made it last longer, and their birds didn't eat as much and they didn't drink as much because they were more hydrated from fermenting the feed. And she said, but it smells god awful. And I commented, stop feeding it, because if it smells god awful, then that means that it's already got bacteria inside of it and you're feeding your birds bacteria.
Well, we've got like 3 good answers right in a row. So
yeah. None. And it messes up the nutrient balance in a balanced feed. John says, feed, it allows it to release the nutrients. Fermenting feed allows it to release the nutrients. I would love to see some scientific data behind that one.
Right now, it's the new craze, fermenting feed.
Yeah, it is.
10 years ago, it was, let's make sprouts for our chickens, right? Making fodder and things like that.
And I mean, birds do eat the grass, but the easiest way I explain it to people is when you ferment feed, what does it do? And they're like, well, it swells up because it absorbs the water and it releases and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So when you go to the Chinese restaurant and you fill up and eat a lot of rice, I mean, if you had to drive a little bit, you're probably hungry when you get home or shortly thereafter, hour or so later. That's the same concept behind they're eating less right now. Let's see. Oh, we've asked that one. What are the early indicators of water belly in a broiler?
Multi-part answer.
It is a 2-part answer. Dang, Laura, you're on it. Their belly gets swollen. They get lethargy. What are some of the other symptoms of that, Joe?
I just popped them up there for everybody so they can. Those are the big ones.
Purple comb. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Give Laura her points.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see here. Before we forget it.
We would like to take a short break to express our appreciation to the Fertrell Company for their sponsorship of the Poultry Keepers 360 Live programming. Fertrell has been a trusted name in sustainable farming and poultry nutrition for decades, and their commitment to providing high-quality, natural product aligned perfectly with the values we hold dear in our poultry community. Thank you, Fertrell, for partnering with us to empower poultry keepers everywhere. We're truly grateful for your dedication and support.
I like the birds in that video. I've also seen a lot about this, and I know that this one sometimes of the year it's more appropriate than others, and I think it is. This question is going to spin off probably a good conversation. But what are the trade-offs in a high protein layered diet?
Any time of year, this time of year.
Any time of the year. What are the trade-offs? Because, everybody, they don't talk about lysine levels and methionine levels. They just talk about the protein. Now, what Rob said is definitely true. If you got their protein, if their protein is too high, their poop smells extra bad. Laura's on fire. I'm curious if she's gone back and been watching some old episodes so she can study. She's almost got 10 points. So
Did
the
you award
trade-offs
the point?
of using high protein layer diet is too much of it stresses the kidneys and the other internal organs out.
Yeah.
You get oversized eggs, excess ammonia, which is what one said about the poop stinking, and a lot of stress. She says she hasn't been studying. She just pays attention as we go.
She must. She must
Hey,
have a photographic memory or something.
I love it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that will feed a game bird to a chicken as a starter because they think they need the higher protein. But if you do it more than a week or two, you're asking for problems.
Well, at least that's a poultry feed. That's better than the people feeding dog food and cat food and or catfish food
Or pigeon food. That's one that someone contacted me about this past week, that they mix pigeon food in with their chicken feed. And I said, why? And said, because it looks good. Okay. Candy looks good too. That don't make it good. So let's see here. What are the challenges of managing pasture raised layers? And what's listed here is 3 different answers that are particular to pastured poultry. And to be honest, I don't think layers is a key part of the answer. It's just pasture raised birds, period. Moving to fresh ground once a month. I bet our friends that we both know down in Central Florida would love it if they only had to move theirs once a month. Yeah.
I don't know. You got to give that to Rob, I think.
Rob?
Yeah. He's
Let's
got
see. Finding the eggs
yeah.
and predators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
The only
got,
other thing that I saw that was mentioned in this was parasite control. But I think if you're managing your flock well, then you're not really going to have a whole lot of issues with parasites. So, Jeff, you know a lot about pastured poultry. Tell us about some of the differences between pastured poultry and raising. If I wanted to raise some egg layers in a coop versus out on pasture, tell us about that a little.
so in a in a good pastured poultry environment where the birds are moved regularly, every day or two, it's actually healthier, right? You definitely have better air quality. You get less bacteria buildup. If you look at like an old chicken coop run, it doesn't take long until it's nothing but dirt and manure and spilled feed and things like that. So it's a cleaner environment, and they're moved every day. They get to express their chickenness by chasing bugs, scratching in the ground, looking for things. They get some greenery. They don't eat a lot of it, but they, up to 5% of their diet can come from vegetation out there. But, really, they're just having a good time, right? Looking for the insects, getting good exercise. But you have to train them to know where to lay their eggs. So, you don't just take a bunch of hens out there, put them in some tall grass and think you're going to get every egg, from every hen every day, right? So, because some of them, their instinct is going to kick in and they're supposed to lay on the ground in a high vegetation place anyway. So but
I mean, that does happen.
Well, there's a lot of management to it. Running pastured poultry is not necessarily easier. It has its benefits, but it's hard for people to understand that you never want the grass taller than your chicken, right? And I see people putting laying hens out there in what we call patriotic hay fields, where it's only cut once a year on 4th of July. And the hen can't see her way back. And she all of a sudden becomes, easy prey because now it's tall enough for the foxes and other predators, and
Yeah.
She can't necessarily find her way back in a hurry. So it's just, I mean, it's a great environment, but the grass should not be taller, no matter how you're doing your pastured poultry, right? From chicks all the way to mature or turkeys or whatever, right? The grass should never be taller than whatever poultry you're putting into it. Just a great rule of thumb.
Now, should poultry follow cows in a rotation, or should cows follow poultry?
Chickens, poultry follow any ruminant or other animal. The only exception to this is if you were grazing hogs, then the hogs would come from behind the chickens to clean up what the chickens left behind. But otherwise, it's always chickens follow, and you want the chickens to be 3 to 5 days behind the ruminant animal, right? Because you want enough time for the fly larvae to start developing in the manure pies from the cattle. So once they figure that out, they'll rip those apart. So they're scattering the manure for you, but they're eating the fly larvae. And I know somebody just got grossed out with what I just said, but they're eating the fly larvae, right? So inevitably, they will be reducing the fly population on the farm.
So I have Rambo, and he loves. I have a quail coop, or I guess you would call it. That I have two of them that are 12 foot long in a row, and man, sometimes he will go over there and just go up underneath it and have a field day eating all the larvae. It's insane.
See, once you get one or two chickens that figure that out, you
Mhm.
need to let them teach others how to do it. Okay. They don't necessarily have that instinct anymore, because we've kept chickens in total captivity, commercialized, etc.
Right.
So some of those instincts are gone. So once you get whatever fowl, that has figured that out, you need to let them teach the young ones to, keep that moving forward. Right?
Kind of like putting an old rooster in your rooster grow out pen.
Yeah.
Makes sense. As a general rule of thumb, how much water does a chicken need daily?
How much what?
Water.
Uh, you asking everybody or just me?
Everybody.
Okay.
See who can pull this one out.
Come on. It's simple.
Hey, Rob, I'm with you on that. Just make sure they never run out. But there actually is.
So how did you ask that question?
How much water, as a general rule of thumb, does a chicken need daily?
Okay.
I see a lot of really good answers because you should never make sure they never run out. But as a rule of thumb, a chicken will consume twice as much water as they do feed. So if you feed
By
them 4
by weight.
ounces,
By weight.
by weight, they will, and that can go up in the summer and down in the winter, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I said a general rule of thumb. And the next question, which may in fact be our last because it is Jeff's favorite thing to talk about, aside from poop. That I know that manure is probably his favorite topic, but what does molting mean in chickens? What happens?
How many answers you looking for? How many pieces of this puzzle are you looking for?
One main part.
Uh,
And Homestead hit the parts. Shedding and regrowth of new feathers. Now, another thing that we look for during this process is them shedding some weight too. Tell us about that, Jeff.
A proper, a really good molt for a chicken, they will lose anywhere from 10 to 20%, maybe even more, depending on how much you've been overfeeding them. So, and when that occurs and we burn off all that internal fat, or the majority of the internal fat, you're never going to get it all. But we also want the ovaries to shrink back down to pullet size ovaries, about the same time she starts to lay. And that will increase her effectiveness in egg laying on the second cycle. Everybody tends to focus on the feathers because they see the feathers fall off, right? Or the feathers start dropping. But feathers are actually secondary to everything else that's going on. So what needs to happen on the inside of the bird with burning off fat, using up fat, and shrinking the ovaries, losing some body weight, basically getting back into shape and getting ready for the next cycle. That is by far more important than just the feather aspect. The feather aspect is important, particularly for everyone who does exhibition poultry, but recycling the inside and the metabolism is, if for longevity purposes, if you want to keep a hen for 10, 12, 14 years, cycling out that internal fat and letting her clean out and lose some weight is going to be more important. Not just the hen and rooster, right? If you want to keep them for an extended period of time.
And, a lot of people, they think about, there were several that talked about the hen reset, them dropping back and it's an egg, like, where they don't lay as many eggs during that period and all that. But what about the cockerel?
Same thing. He needs to, you want those testes to reduce and shrink a little bit in size. It's really important to get the fat away from those internal organs like the testes. Okay. So, to have a really great next breeding season, getting those back in shape, is, if you want lots of fertility and you want lots of offspring, and that's what it takes.
Let's see. And look, this next question, I've flat out been told I don't know what I'm talking about when I try talking to somebody about this. Why do chickens need grit? What does it do?
For me or the community? For the group?
Oh, this is gonna be our last question for the group, and then let's see. what you have to think. I really think John was pretty quick with this one. And I do like the other answers too. That shows that people are listening. So, aside from breaking down the food, tell us about that process. How does it work?
Well, since poultry don't have teeth, right? They have an internal organ referred to as the gizzard, and everything goes into the crop first and gets moistened and softened when they drink the water, right? And then it'll transfer down to the gizzard. So just like Lori said, it's chicken's teeth, right? So when it gets down to the gizzard, which is just, a huge muscle that's constantly contracting and moving, and it grinds whatever's inside, and it won't come out the other side until the particle size is just about the same size as cornmeal or flour or something like that. And then it'll go into the gut and the intestinal tract for nutrient absorption. So the grit aids all poultry. Okay, it doesn't matter. All birds, period. It's a requirement for them to efficiently and effectively grind what they've eaten for the day. Okay, so whether it's insects, whether it's seeds, whether it's grass, whether it's whatever. Okay, so it is one of the most essential nutrients that people tend to neglect. Is grit.
So, and I'm going to leave y'all. We're going to end.
Laura says not parrots. Why not parrots? Maybe they tear it. Maybe they can tear it with their beaks.
So parrots, they have the hooked beak that's pointy, and they can actually tear stuff.
Yeah, but don't they still have a gizzard?
No, that I don't know. They skin their food, so they'll use that beak to peel it back.
But I would think
Jeff, we learned two things tonight. Yeah, John owns one, and he said that they'll gradually use it with the beak and cut it up. Cool. So we'll leave y'all tonight with a pro tip. If you're growing your own Thanksgiving turkey, after you do the deed, make sure you remove the gizzard so your wife doesn't find it as she's cooking it. We will see y'all in 2 weeks.
See y'all.